The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were led to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When I joke about movies being very loosely based on a true story, that opening dialogue from John Larroquette and the wild popularity of that movie is what I'm referring to. While it may not be the first movie to falsely present itself as a true story, it's one of the most famous and certainly the most famous early example in the realm of horror. I've joked about it enough, but let's actually take a good look at what, if anything, resembles truth from one of the best to ever do it. Don't pick up any weird-looking stray hitchhikers as we find out what really happened to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Tobe Hooper was an assistant director and documentary cameraman at the University of Texas at Austin in the early 1970s. He came up with the ideas for a movie involving isolation, darkness, and the woods, but like the gang from A Clockwork Orange, felt that he needed a little bit of the old ultraviolet. He felt that way when he was astonished to see the graphic violence shown on the news coming out of San Antonio. He then based his killer, or at least some of the aspects of the killer, on Wisconsin's Ed Gein, who was convicted in the 1950s. Now, here's where the tricky part comes in. Hooper puts in the beginning of the movie a bit about the movie you're about to see is true, and that was an intentional deception. The Vietnam War, Watergate, and the oil crisis of 1973 were all moments in time that the general public was lied to about, and his cinematic misinformation was his response. Hooper wasn't alone though, as he co-wrote the script with the co-writer of his first film, Eggshells, Kim Henkel. While Hooper based his story crimes very loosely on Ed Gein, Henkel was more interested and astonished with the story of Elmer Wayne Henley, who was involved in what came to be known as the Houston mass murders. Henley helped lead nearly 30 young men and teenage boys to the home of Dean Corll over the span of 1970 to 1973, before Henley killed Corll allegedly in self-defense. What Henkel found interesting, and something that he added to his characters, was a lack of remorse and full ownership of their crimes. Henley, like the family that does the killing in today's movie, completely owned his crimes, and Henkel worked that into his portion of the screenplay. Henkel was also the writer for Eaten Alive, which is directed by Hooper, and The Unseen from 1980. He would also go on to direct and write the 4th installment of the series, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Yeah, that would end up being his only directorial effort. The cast for the movie was mostly local talent from stage, commercials, or TV, or even just people that Hooper knew personally. Marilyn Burns wouldn't end up making much after this, but did show up in Eaten Alive and 2 other Texas Chainsaw movies, while Gunnar Hansen would make a nice niche for himself in some fun horror movies like Mosquito, Campfire Tales, and Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, before a final Chainsaw appearance in the iteration from 2013. Probably the most famous on-screen talent is just a voice. John Larroquette was an unknown who worked for Weed and would end up doing the narration again for the remake and its prequel. The movie was a smash success, with it making $30 million on its $80,000 to $140,000 budget, but the people that actually made the movie didn't reap the benefits as much as you would hope due to making a bad deal with some bad people. It gained controversy as Hooper asked for a PG rating due to much of the gore not being expressly visible, but it was instead slapped with an X before Cuts dropped it to an R rating. It would end up on the vaunted Video Nasty list and had some screenings either flush with walkouts like San Francisco, or direct threats with citation and violations like in Canada. It remains one of the most successful independent films of all time, as well as one of the best horror films ever made. The movie opens with a camera snapping hard to see Polaroids, followed by a pile of body parts set up in a grisly fashion, before we meet a group of friends that includes Sally and her brother Franklin, along with their buddies Jerry, Pam, and Kirk. They're on their way to a property owned by Sally and Franklin's family, the Hardestys. They pick up a very strange hitchhiker who tries to sell them a photograph after mentioning that his family is in the animal slaughter business, just like the Hardestys are. They refuse to buy the picture, and the man cuts Franklin before being chased out of the van. He also cut his own hand and smeared blood on the side of the vehicle as it drives away. Okay, look, we're gonna try to make this interesting, but I was serious when I said this was the joke I use when saying movies that are purported true stories aren't as bad as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when it comes to their validity. If you're looking at the Ed Gein side of things, there's really nothing here that is similar to what is seen on the screen. He had a brother and a very strange and sad childhood upbringing. If you look at what Kim Hinkle used as inspiration, there isn't a ton that is familiar here either with Henley. He was one of 4 sons, and I guess the fact that he was in Houston, Texas puts him in the same state as the film at least. The group of friends isn't exactly lured into anything either like Henley was involved in. We will try to look at both inspirations throughout to see if there's anything similar. The van starts to run low on fuel, but is told that the gas station has nothing left to give. They find an abandoned house owned by the family of Sally and Franklin, but more importantly, Kirk and Pam find a different, nearby house that seems to be running off a generator. Generator means gas, and so the two go over to see about trading for some when we meet who we affectionately come to know as Leatherface. He's called Leatherface because he fashions a mask made out of the skin of his victims. Pam goes looking for Kirk and stumbles into a room full of human and animal bones and skin, along with feathers and other assorted atrocities before being hung on a hook and killed. A short time later, Jerry enters the house and befalls the same fate as his friends. This may be the most accurate part of the movie to label based on a true story. For the Ed Gein side of things, what he ended up doing apart from killing at least 2 people was dig up graves and use the skin and bones for various things. When the police finally apprehended him, they found, among other things, chairs covered by human skin, skulls on his bedposts, bowls made of human skulls, a human skin suit including leggings and corsets, and a female nipple doorbell. Gein had become so obsessed with his mother at an early age that he eventually wanted to become her and effectively crawl back inside her. Leatherface's appearance, as well as that room that Pam stumbles into, are really the biggest parts that you could put together with Gein, and even then it's not exactly apples to apples, or I suppose bodies to bodies. The only similarity to Henley and the Houston mass murders is the number of victims there are. There's no confirmation of how many people Leatherface and his family killed, but it had to be a lot. The number that Henley was involved with was almost 30. Sally and Franklin are all that remain when nightfall rolls around, and they're attacked with Franklin brutally killed in his wheelchair and Sally left to run through the woods. She makes it to the house where her friends were all killed, and she sees an elderly body upstairs where she's chased away to a gas station / food place. The owner drives her back to the house where we find that the hitchhiker, gas station owner, and Leatherface are all brothers, and the very much alive elderly man is their grandpa. Sally is to be killed with a hammer, but when the family's attempt to have the grandfather do it fails, she escapes. When the hitchhiker and Leatherface chase her, the hitchhiker is killed after being struck by a truck, and Leatherface is knocked down, injuring himself, while Sally escapes in the back of the truck screaming a mix of joy and insanity. Again, there isn't much here. If you look at the Ed Gein side of things, he was alone in the acts that he committed, and neither victim he had while alive was able to escape. Gein was put in a mental hospital after a juryless trial where he would die in 1984 at the age of 77. The movie at least has a passing resemblance to the end of the Henley saga. While the main murderer Coral preferred men and teenage boys, Henley ended up bringing a girl to the house where the killings happened, which made Coral turn on Henley. The woman in question, while she was about to be murdered, was able to convince Henley to stop and kill Coral and let them escape, so we have a Sally avatar from real life. Henley called the police after 2 victims made it out safely and admitted to everything. Just like Gein though, and unlike Leatherface, Henley would not go on to have any sequels. He was tried for 6 murders of the boys he brought to Coral, and he is still in prison today with his next parole opportunity being 2025. Well, we did it. We tackled the very untrue story of a purportedly true tale. Texas Chainsaw is still an all-time classic, but if you want to watch anything based on the 2 inspirations for it to, actually learn more, you're much better off elsewhere. While there aren't any big movies about the Houston Massacre, there was a loose adaptation called Freak Out in 2003. Gein has a few more options, with the best being Deranged from 1974, but don't sleep on the self-titled Ed Gein, which is also known as In the Light of the Moon, starring Steve Railsback from 2000. Nothing will ever take away from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even if some of its sequels tried their damnedest. But if you'd like to explore the stories that inspired it, you'd best find another farm to explore.